Welcome, everyone, to the brand new edition and brand new podcast that we have for you previewing the Atlantic Lacrosse Conference. We're calling this podcast the Atlantic Lacrosse Sideline Podcast. I'll be your host for the day today, Dan Zumpano, here with an excellent guest that we'll have, the first of many great guests that we'll have on this podcast. But we have for us today one of the most influential minds in club lacrosse, Virginia Tech lacrosse head coach and president of the Atlantic Lacrosse Conference and on the board of directors for the MCLA. Please welcome Panchito Ojeda. Coach, how's it going?
That's good, Dan. Thanks. That's very kind of you. I'm just another guy.
See, you're very modest, which is what I appreciate about you. So this is a really exciting thing for the ALC to be able to explore a new media space. Do you feel like we've kind of had this idea brewing for a while to be able to do this? What's the goal of this podcast, you think, for the conference in and of itself?
I mean, this really started back when Kyle sort of took the reins to break off from the SCLC and open the door for more teams to be able to get to nationals. And, Kyle always laid out this idea that we wanted to, be a leader in the space, both administratively and other ways. And so, we've done good budgeting. Chris Demers was our treasurer for a few years, and now it's Mike Zumpano, and they've both done a great job. And so we've got a little extra money for the conference and wanted to use it in a way that was beneficial for our teams, but also sheds light on the MCLA as a whole and just, exposes our teams to a broader audience. And hopefully, people realize how great MCLA lacrosse is.
MCLA lacrosse, for those obviously listening in, this is kind of the next step below the NCAA level, but the highest level of kind of quote unquote, I guess you would say club lacrosse, amateur lacrosse, whatever you want to call it. So with this conference going into year number 5, you mentioned that they broke off from the SCLC in 2021. And now it seems like the success of this conference has been really, really high as the years have gone on, especially with some of the stuff that we saw last year in 2024, which is exactly what we're going to get into now. So, Coach, you obviously coach at Virginia Tech. You were one of the teams that made the MCLA tournament. Altogether, 5 bids, both in the D1 and D2 level for the conference. 11 All-Americans at the D1 level, 9 at the D2 level. Did you ever think this was going to be the possibility of this happening for, the 5-year plan when you started the conference?
I mean, I think one of the things that Kyle and I talked a lot about and really was probably one of the reasons why I think we're getting to where we are is that, when with the SCLC, there was just so many teams, 16 Division I teams, right? Only 4 per region. It was really hard to make the playoffs. It was really hard to, be successful in that conference. And, it sort of held back some teams who were just sort of stuck like, oh man, if I don't win, 2 of my 4 regional games, I'm done. One loss could take you out of the playoffs, in February. And we've seen the growth. West Virginia's gotten better. They made the Final Four this year for the first time. James Madison, new member, came from the nickel. They've done really well. Temple made the Final Four a couple of years ago. Obviously, Tennessee's seen a resurgence, with the Max Damala guy at the faceoff. He's outstanding for them. And, they've really done well. So obviously, Virginia Tech and Liberty have been kind of at the forefront of their region for a while, but those other teams have stepped up. NC State, Clemson, all of them have had really good success in the ALC. And it's, I think, in part the breakaway. But the counter to that is also that it's not just affected the ALC, right? We've seen success in the SCLC. Florida has really improved, right? South Carolina continues to be great. And, obviously Georgia Tech's still good. And Georgia had a really good year a couple years ago. In fact, a tough loss to Liberty in the last 8 seconds. What a game that was. Yeah. So, I think that it was always envisioned that it would open the door for more and more teams to be successful. Did I think that the ALC would do this well this quickly? I did not, but it's really great to see. And every team has really stepped their game up, both on the field and off it to achieve it. So it's pretty cool.
Let's look at 2024 and kind of recap it a little bit for those who don't really remember. We'll go back. D1 level, like we talked about, 3 bids to the Final Four, or to the MCLA tournament rather, 2 bids to the MCLA tournament for the Division II level. But man, what a tournament as well at the conference tournament in Lynchburg was so exciting. We had some great teams. Obviously, you guys played an epic game against Liberty. Tennessee and West Virginia, just a really physical contest. And then Tennessee and Liberty come out on top, with Liberty being crowned the champion. But you guys, Liberty and Tennessee, all getting a chance to go to Texas to the MCLA tournament. Just so much success for that conference. Talk about maybe some of the teams that you were really impressed with last year and maybe some of the teams that you're looking forward to seeing in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Liberty is always impressive. They've been at the top of the block for a long time. I think Tennessee coming back, it's funny. One of the conference members, Buff Grubb, has been around for, forever. And he coached Tennessee back when I was playing, and they were the top 5 team in the country. And so it's not surprising to see that they are capable of being at that same level again. And, I was talking to the president at Tennessee, Mason Kane. They said they had over 90 kids, coming in for tryouts. So they're going to have another really good roster. James Madison got a Liberty transfer, actually, Aiden Miller, who played outstanding in goal for them this year. They had a great year, got a big win over Arizona, were ranked for most of the year. I think they were, probably just ran out of gas at the end, right? West Virginia pulled off the upset, but James Madison was a really, really great team. West Virginia, again, first time to the Final Four, to my knowledge, in their history. What an opportunity for them to do. I can only imagine that's going to build more confidence in Morgantown, and we'll see them back at the forefront. And then, Clemson didn't have the best record last year, but they had a lot of young guys the past 2 years, freshmen, sophomores. And, Coach Tobias is a heck of a coach. I would expect that they're a team that we might see, really make a jump from year over year. Their leading scorer was a guy, Ian Jackson, I believe. And then they had another a lefty attackman. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was another young guy who was really good. So, ALC top to bottom, there's not really a easy game in the conference anymore, which is both good and bad, right?
Well, what's nice about the conference, I think, is that you've seen so many teams make the conference tournament over the last few years. We've had NC State in it. We've had Temple in it. We've had Pitt in it. Now West Virginia joined that ranks. Tennessee was such a great story because not only were they able to kind of rise up in the ranks, but they also, 20 plus years of not being in an MCLA tournament, and they go. And they obviously lost in the first round, but, it was a really big story throughout all of the MCLA lacrosse. It was really followed really closely, and what a great job they did. And, they're obviously going to be transitioning maybe with a new coach here this year and try to keep it going.
Right.
But, that was a great season for them. But you mentioned Clemson. Super interested in how you feel about them in particular, because you're right. They gave you guys some trouble last year. You guys were able to beat them. But, they were really young, and now they're going to return a lot of guys to a staff that's obviously, you talked about, really well coached.
Right. Yeah. Clemson's always been really good. They had the years where they had the Furman transfers, and they really accelerated in that top 5, made the Final Four one of those seasons, which was outstanding. I think that was 2022. And then, I think they're well set up for success. I think the faceoff guys are both young guys. They got a young goalie, so they're strong up the middle. And, there's going to be athletes there, right? They get really good players to come to Clemson. So it's just a matter of whether or not the right group of guys sticks around to play. So, yeah, I would expect them to be right back in the mix. And they've been there before, right? They've been to the Final Four. The coaching staff's been there. They know the process. They know the formula. They know what it takes. So I think they will be very difficult. I think the ALC South is a really tough division. Clemson, Virginia Tech, NC State, Tennessee, and UNC and High Point, right? We don't even know what they have, but they could be great. They could not be great. I have no idea, but it's going to be tough sledding for sure. So it's good. Clemson's going to be great.
really exciting with things happening at the Division One level. Teams are really, really stepping up, and that's going to be super competitive in 2025. Coach, I want to talk about 2025 for the D2 level programs. Obviously, UNC Charlotte has dominated the last few years. However, changing the guard at the top, does that maybe leave the door open, or do you think that's going to be a smooth transition, even with those teams coming through, Wake Forest, Coastal, other teams that have challenged them in the past?
Well, first, let's give a big thanks to Coach Nick for
Yes.
his time and service at UNCC. I mean, what a job he did there. I mean, they won 3 titles. I think he said the senior class won every year that they were there, that just graduated. I mean, what a story. Um, I mean, I think every year it's going to be competitive. I mean, Coastal's obviously shown that they're right there. I mean, I thought App State looked good at the at the Final Four. I mean, obviously I saw them play our Virginia Tech D2 team. I thought they looked good there as well. So I mean, they're a pretty good team. Coastal's hired a new coach, Earl Brewer, and for those of you guys don't know, he's a legendary coach. I think he coached at Langley High School. No, it's not Langley. Well, I could be wrong. Anyways, he coached up in Northern Virginia for a while, but he was in the Hall of Fame. He runs Virginia Elite Lacrosse. I mean, the guy's been around forever. Obviously knows how to coach. So I would expect them to take a step forward. So, and then Wake's been right there knocking at the door, and they have probably maybe the best goalie in Division Two. Jack Church is pretty good, or Jake Church, excuse me, he's pretty good. So I think they're going to be good. And then I wouldn't put out any of the other D2 guys that are knocking on the door. I mean, I think Virginia Tech's Division Two team's pretty good.
Sure.
I think the UNCW guys got their stuff together. They look like they're ready to compete. So again, just like Division One, the depth of talent here in the ALC is just growing every single day.
Yeah, you look at the whole entire league last year. You only had 5 teams with losing records of the Division Two. So I mean, it was very competitive. Even William and Mary, teams like that were able to rise above and get to a winning record. That was a really solid year for them. So going to definitely be looking forward to seeing what D2 has in store, seeing if Charlotte can stay on top, obviously, and seeing if we can add another team into the MCLA tournament. That would be a really big step, you think, towards more success going forward. A Wake, maybe a Virginia Tech D2 team.
Right.
So that's really, really exciting. Let's take a look at what's going to happen coming up in this offseason. Obviously, with the offseason, summer part of that being done and away with, now you guys are all moving towards fall ball and some of the tournaments, some of the matchups that will be happening. You guys are going to be scrimmaging a few teams here this year. I know the great thing that's awesome is that you get to see some of these MCLA teams against some NCAA level teams. So that's really, really fun. But there's also the ALC meeting and the fall meetings that are coming up this weekend and down in North Carolina, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's at Wake Forest this year. We've been at NC State for a while, moved it a little bit further north to Winston-Salem. So we'll be there. It'll be great. Coach Hewitt's got us all things dialed in, so it'll be awesome. And actually, Wake's playing UNC and Duke in a little round robin that day,
Cool.
so it's gonna be awesome.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned a couple of those teams there that we're going to have to talk about. Is that there are some applications in the works for new teams into the ALC. What is your thought process going into this weekend, and what are those teams? Let the public know, hey, this is coming.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky, UNC, and High Point all applied for membership. I think the days of getting accepted on the fall meeting are sort of like old school, right? Like I would expect that they're going to get voted in, based off of conversations. We've all scheduled them on the schedule, preparing for next season, and that sort of stuff. But we'll just kind of go one by one. Kentucky, reached out to us, in the springtime to discuss this, and they've really got their stuff together. I mean, Kentucky was in the SELC. They left on not the best terms, and the guys here, really were like, hey, we'll settle that debt, and they took care of all of that, and they are motoring forward. They seem like a team that's like ready to be competitive right out of the gate. UNC and High Point both reached out as well. For them, they had a tougher sort of process, right? They sort of came in thinking they were going to go Division Two. They've played other MCLA Division Two teams, And then at the MCLA meeting, the league voted to change the rule to be if you have an NCAA Division One program at your school, you have to go MCLA Division One. So that was a big adjustment for all of our teams and for them. And to their credit, they stayed the course and still wanted to come, and they're ready to compete, and both teams seem ready. So actually, our opening weekend is against those two teams because that was the only weekend we could find on the schedule to make it work. So we get to go right into divisional play on day one.
Wow. That's a hit in the ground running for sure with those new teams. Coach, how has the late arrivals of these teams affected the schedule making for you, obviously, with Virginia Tech, but have you heard other teams and other coaches struggle with that to find the open dates?
There was a little bit of that chatter, but I think one of the good things about the ALC is that it's been really driven towards the greater good of the conference. Everyone's willing to maybe take something they don't love and still figure it out, right? Like I don't want to play back to back opening weekend against divisional opponents, right? But that's what worked best for everyone involved, and so we did it. And I think everyone's kind of taken that modus operandi, which is really important for the growth of our league. And I think it's one of the reasons we've been so successful is that no one, obviously we want to win our games and we care about the success of our individual teams, but we care about it within the framework of the conference. And so, that sort of conference friendliness is important. And it's something that, is big, right? Like, I don't know what you grew up. I grew up an ACC fan. I was a Duke fan actually growing up. And so like, as much as I hated North Carolina, I would rather North Carolina win than the ACC hoist the trophy than any other conference. And I think our guys take the same sort of approach to it.
It sounds like you were built for this job with that kind of a mentality. So, so that's really cool. We talk about those two teams, High Point and North Carolina in particular, with NCAA teams. What's the thought process you think from the MCLA as to why they would make a decision like that, especially having teams already in the league with NCAA programs?
Well, it's interesting. The rule of not having NCAA teams was not put in place by well, it was put in place by the MCLA, but it was not done so kind of at their behest. It was sort of done at the behest of the NCAA coaches because they felt like lacrosse was at a crossroads that they weren't fully funded yet. It was still young, right? This was back in the late '90s, early 2000s, and so I think the MCLA sort of was trying to do what's best for lacrosse by keeping those teams out. And I think that the MCLA kind of harkened back to their mission, which is to offer lacrosse to any school that wants to have a club level team, right? And if they want to meet the expectations of the MCLA, then hey, that's awesome. I think it doesn't come without its own problems, right? Like I think there's, for some of us who don't have an NCAA team on campus, right? It's nice being like the team. Whereas like now maybe it's watered down a little bit, but I think in general, it kind of goes back to the MCLA mission, and that's probably why they decided it. I wasn't at the meeting when it got voted in, so I couldn't say what was said in the room, but that would be my guess. And I think I think in the end, it's a speed bump right now that some people may not love, but I think in the end we'll all be fine with it.
Let's go and talk about the way this affects the conference, and particularly in how the divisions are aligned. The last couple of years, especially last year, 5 teams per division. The way the tournament has always worked is that there's kind of like a play-in game for that last spot, and then you have kind of the North number 1 playing the South number 2, and the South number 1 playing the North number 2 as part of the tournament structure. Is there going to be anything different, and how are these teams fitting into these divisions this year?
Yeah, no difference in the playoff structure. It'll still be the same 6 teams with a quarterfinal weekend. Excuse me. But the UNC and High Point are going to slot into the South, along with Clemson, Virginia Tech, NC State, and Tennessee. And then the rest of the teams will be in the North. So Kentucky will be in the North. This was sort of a geographic problem for us, right? Like the Kentucky to Temple trip is long, but fortunately they had already scheduled a game, so that kind of worked out in the short term. I think we'll sort of look at and see if there's a better way to draw divisions, but it's just a wide, expensive area. So we'll see how that shakes out.
I'm assuming East Carolina is moving.
Uh, right. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. East Carolina has moved to Division Two, which was, I think, a smart move for them. I had spoken with them about that last summer, if that was something they wanted to do, and they were on the fence about it. And then, about halfway through the season, they were like, you know what, this is a better fit for us. Competitively, kind of where our club structure is at right now, we should be in Division Two, and I think everyone in the ALC leadership supported that as a move that was good for them, and it helps Division Two, right? Division Two has a round number of 12 teams now. No, they have 14 teams, I believe. So they're going to be slotting down in the South, which will be perfect.
Okay. So all the tournament structure stays the same. Those are your way your divisions are going to line up. ALC tournament. It's been in Lynchburg every single year. Are you planning on returning there? And are there any new things that you'd like to enhance for the 2025 tournament?
Yeah, so we'll be back in Lynchburg in 25. We signed a 2-year deal, a couple at the end of 23 for 24 and 25. Before we talk about the tournament in the future, we should give a shout out to Lauren McQuillan. She's been our tournament director, done an amazing job. We have one of the best run tournaments in the country. She, alongside Kyle and the Liberty coaches, have done a lot to help get everything set up. I know some of the Liberty staff have worked it, including yourself, which has been great. I think in the future, we're really just trying to continue to make this the best possible player experience. This is player dues money that goes into funding this, and our whole job and focus is like, how can we make this a great experience for those who are there, and then also how can we make a good broadcast so that those who are not physically there can experience the vibes of the tournament. And Lauren's done a great job. So we partnered with Rush Homes last year to be there, which I think was a great success. It brought in some new people, gave something for the kids to kind of look at, and people to raise money for, a nonprofit in Lynchburg, which can really benefit, people getting housing. Jameson and Lewis, our lead sponsor, has been super supportive of doing, whatever's necessary to help make the tournament outstanding. So, everyone's lifting a hand, and it's just been a really good effort. So I think, just keep that rolling. There's not a lot to change right now.
Is there any more news and notes from around the league, or you think that basically this is where we're headed for another big tournament, another big year, Division I, Division II, looking to be super competitive? Any more things that you see coming up the pike, or are we just getting excited for fall ball and then heading into spring?
Yeah, I mean, the MCLA's got we're back in Round Rock next year,
Yeah.
which is cool. It's going to be hot as blazes, I'm sure. But I think the league made the adjustment to have the Pearl Ball be the ball of the MCLA, the official ball of the MCLA for the whole season, which is it's kind of been met with mixed reviews, I think, from the people I've heard, but they're cool balls. They're really easy to see, and they last a long time. So that is kind of it's neat, and it can be good news. I think one of the biggest things I've noticed in the MCLA that's changed is teams are really upholding the scheduling stuff. I mean, I think there's only one fine handed out this year from conference for teams canceling out of conference games, which is awesome. I mean, this means teams want to compete. So I think it's been great. I think this is every year the MCLA gets better, and every year it gets deeper. I mean, gosh, last year in the Division I ranks, at least, I mean, 1 through 15, 1 through 16, all felt like they could win it. I didn't think there was a game that couldn't have been lost by somebody. It was awesome, and we saw some upsets, which is cool. So I think we'll see some more of that this coming season. So it's going to be good.
It's going to be really exciting. Last question here for you, Coach. How about the influx of NCAA players transferring to not just MCLA, but how about the ALC in general? I mean, Charlotte's gotten a big recruit coming in from Jacksonville, transferred, one of the defensemen down there. Obviously, a lot of news around Caleb Hammett coming to Liberty. That's a huge deal at face-off. Talk about that and how that might allow the MCLA to thrive and maybe even take off. I know we've had so much talk around them. And maybe for MCLA people, it's been a lot of talk because when Paul Rabel mentions you, I think that's a big deal for a lot of MCLA people. But how can the MCLA kind of encapsulate that and really build off of that momentum with all these NCAA transfers coming in?
I mean, I don't think this is that new, to be honest. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just getting reported. I remember, gosh, I'm old enough now to remember this, but I remember when the Houghton twins transferred from Denver to BYU, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, BYU's going to win the next 4 national championships." And I actually don't think they won one when they were there. The Houghton twins can play lacrosse; they're really good.
Sure.
It's just, it just means there's really good players that are coming to the MCLA, and what I think is good about it is that these NCAA athletes are seeing that it's a viable alternative to NCAA lacrosse. There's high school students already making that decision. I think, you can look at like Aiden Smith on my team from last year. I mean, that young man could have played a lot of places.
Absolutely.
And he chose to come here. So I think that there is a lot of players that are just looking at these MCLA institutions and seeing that there's an alternative option that's just as strong. And I mean, Caleb's a great example. I told Kyle I would only call him the Drip King when I talked to him, but he's a great example of someone who's had great success at the NCAA level, still sees MCLA as a viable competitive alternative, right? Dylan Hess down at Florida.
Right.
I mean, gosh, the kid's an incredible athlete. He's playing for the Gators now. I mean, that's going to definitely jolt their program. I think it's good, right? Good players playing good lacrosse. And what's going to be great is to see how coaches respond, right? Because now we have to prepare a little bit better. It's not just like my athletes are better than your athletes. It's like, well, most of my athletes might be better than yours, but you got a couple that are way better than mine. So I got to figure out how to solve this problem or whatever, which is good. The coaching game is important, and players executing game plans and stuff like that. It's going to be, I think, again, it just makes for better lacrosse and more fun lacrosse. So
that's awesome, Coach. Give us a little preview of the fall, what Virginia Tech's going to, obviously go through as you guys start to mature in this process of the 2025 team. Obviously, with Aiden Smith heading off, graduating, that's a big, big loss. But you guys have some guys coming back this next year that could definitely keep that team where it has been over the last couple of years, Final Four appearances and #1 overall rankings and this, that, and the other. I mean, talk about what you guys have coming up in the fall this year.
Yeah, so we play Navy this Saturday actually, and then we'll play Liberty the following weekend, and then we wrap up with Tennessee. So a good little fall schedule. Tennessee's in the 1st of November, so a good little fall schedule. A couple of games, some good competition. We had a really great graduating class last year. Really proud of those guys. They did an amazing job for us, and we got a lot of great guys here now. I mean, it's a new group, right? It's the young guys who were on the team the past couple of years who are now going to mature into roles of being the old guys, and that always takes time, but it's a really fun process to put that together, and it's not going to come without its lumps, but that's okay. I'm pretty confident. Our group's good. We hired a new defensive coach this year, which is exciting. He's a old Air Force goalie, so he's going to do a great job, and we'll see. I mean, everyone feels great about their team in September, but really it's asking me what they look like at the end of May, and I'll let you know how I feel.
Spoken like a true coach. I love it. Well, Coach, it's really, really, we really, really appreciate you taking the time out as the president of the conference, as a coach, busy, all over the place, but we really appreciate you taking the time to join us on our inaugural episode of the ALC Sidelines podcast. This is going to be exciting. We're going to get the chance to preview even more teams as we go along, talk to more coaches, more players, and shine a light on what this conference is doing. It's a super exciting time to be an ALC and MCLA fan.
Yeah, man. Thanks for hosting the podcast. You're going to be great, and we're literally taking the league by storm. We're the only conference that has our own podcast.
Setting the bar high, and with this first episode, we're setting the bar really high for those coaches coming in because you did a great job yourself. So. Thanks so much,
man.
Coach. You can listen to the ALC Sidelines podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, follow the podcast on Instagram at Atlantic Lacrosse Conference and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Atlantic LC. For Coach Panchito Ojeda, I'm Dan Zumpano. Thank you for listening to the ALC Sidelines podcast.